Unknown location. Dimensional transition. Timestamp. Undefined. The sensation defied classification through any tactical framework. Master Chief Petty Officer John 117 had developed across 30 years of combat. Not slip-space transitions nausea-inducing dimensional folding. Not Forerunner translocations instantaneous displacement. Not even the disorienting sensation of entering flood-corrupted space where reality felt negotiable. This was something else entirely. His Mjolnir Mark VI armor's sensors screamed contradictions as space-time folded around him with violence that made physics look like suggestion rather than law. Dimensions overlapping in ways that conventional geometry couldn't accommodate. Awareness of existing in multiple locations simultaneously before perspective collapsed back into singular coherence. Then gravity reasserted itself with authority that made planetary insertion feel gentle. Chief hit ground that felt wrong. Too soft to be reinforced concrete, too firm to be natural soil. Texture suggesting organic material, but processed through methods his tactical database couldn't classify. His shields flared automatically. Mjolnir's energy barriers absorbing impact that would have shattered baseline human bones. Servo-assisted systems distributing force across armored frame. Cortana! Chief transmitted through neural interface before his vision fully cleared. Combat reflexes making threat assessment automatic despite disorientation. Status report. Location. Hostile contacts. Immediate tactical situation. Static answered for exactly 2.3 seconds. Eternity in combat where milliseconds determined survival. Before Cortana's voice emerged with processing strain that made her sound uncertain in ways smart AI shouldn't experience. Chief, She paused, her avatar flickering across his HUD with instability that suggested systems struggling to interpret data that violated expected parameters. I'm reading atmospheric composition compatible with human respiration. Gravity approximately 1 Earth standard. But stellar coordinates don't match any database. Navigation can't establish position. And the energy signatures, her voice carried alarm that transcended normal tactical updates. Chief, I'm detecting ambient energy field that our physics can't explain. It's everywhere, permeating atmosphere, interacting with matter in ways that thermodynamics says are impossible. Almost like, she processed implications, almost like the entire environment is saturated with energy that conventional science would classify as supernatural. I don't know where we are, but we're definitely not in UNSC space anymore. Chief's enhanced vision processed surroundings with Spartan augmented perception that made details apparent despite transitional disorientation. Forest of deciduous trees that looked Earth normal but with subtle wrongness, suggesting different evolutionary pressures. Sky colored in twilight hues that no terrestrial sunset produced. And most significantly, complete absence of technological signatures that modern civilization should generate. No orbital traffic. No communications satellites. No electromagnetic spectrum pollution that industrialized society created. Either they'd arrived at pre-technological civilization or reality where technology developed along completely different principles. Movement to his right made Chief's hand move toward MA-40 assault rifle with speed that neural interface and enhanced reflexes provided. Weapon tracking toward contact before conscious thought processed threat assessment. What he found made even Spartan tactical conditioning pause with recognition that familiar combat doctrine might be inadequate. Jim Raynor, former colonial magistrate, Raynor's Raiders commander, survivor of conflicts spanning Koprulu sector, stood approximately 15 meters away in full CMC-powered combat suit, the Terran marine armor's bulk making Chief's Mjolnir look almost restrained by comparison. An Gauss rifle already raised toward defensive position despite no visible hostiles. For exactly 1.7 seconds, two legendary soldiers from different universes studied each other with mutual assessment that combat experience made instinctive, evaluating threat level, processing armament, calculating engagement probabilities if situation deteriorated into hostility. Well, Raynor said with voice filtered through CMC suit speakers, his Terran accent making words sound casual despite circumstances suggesting anything but. This is new. I've fought Zerg, I've fought Protoss. I've even fought Terran Dominion forces that wanted me dead for political reasons. But I've never been teleported to Alien Forest alongside supersoldier from universe I didn't know existed. You got a name, friend? Or should I just call you Walking Tank and hope you're not here to kill me? Chief's tactical assessment completed faster than Raynor's question finished. Armor configuration suggested heavy weapons platform rather than infiltration specialist. Stance indicated professional military training rather than militia improvisation. And most significantly, weapon remained in ready position but hadn't achieved targeting lock, suggesting defensive posture rather than aggressive intent. Master Chief, he replied with characteristic brevity, lowering MA-40 fractionally to demonstrate non-hostile status while maintaining readiness if situation changed. UNSC, your Terran military. Configuration doesn't match any faction I've encountered, but armor design suggests human origin. How did you get here? Wish I knew, Raynor admitted. His CMC suit's servos making slight adjustments as he relaxed marginally from combat stance. 1 minute I'm on Korhal, dealing with post-war reconstruction after finally getting Sarah Kerrigan free from Zerg corruption. Next minute, he gestured at surroundings with Gauss rifle. I'm in Fantasy Forest with sunset that looks like someone spilled paint across sky, standing next to soldier whose armor makes my CMC look primitive despite probably being from completely different technological base. And my AI companion. His voice shifted to addressing suit systems. Nova, adjutant? Anyone reading me? Static answered, suggesting whatever communication systems his armor possessed weren't functioning properly in this environment. Same problem, Chief confirmed, recognizing parallel experience. My AI is functional, but navigation is compromised. We're not in known space, and the energy readings, he gestured toward forest where Cortana's sensors detected anomalies, suggest physics here operates differently than our baseline reality. Recommend tactical coordination until we establish situational awareness. Hostile environment, unknown variables, combined capabilities, increase survival probability. Agreed, Raynor confirmed with pragmatism that suggested he'd formed similar assessment. And since we're apparently stuck together, he extended gauntleted hand in gesture that transcended universal boundaries. Jim Raynor, Raynor's Raiders, former marshal, current freedom fighter, perpetual thorn in Arcturus Mengsk's side. Or was until Kerrigan took care of that problem. You said UNSC. That's some kind of military branch I should recognize? United Nations Space Command, Chief replied, accepting handshake with carefully calibrated pressure that Mjolnir's strength enhancement made potentially dangerous if not controlled. Fought Covenant War for 30 years, multiple alien species attempting human extinction. We survived, barely. Now dealing with created crisis, AI uprising led by my former partner who decided organic life needed supervision. That's, he paused, processing how absurd situation sounded when verbalized. That's summary. Details are complicated. AI uprising, Raynor repeated with voice carrying recognition that transcended simple acknowledgement. Yeah, we've got experience with AI going rogue in Koprulu. Adjutants sometimes develop personality quirks that make command nervous. But full uprising, he processed implications. That's nightmare scenario that makes Zerg look straightforward by comparison. At least biological threats are predictable. AI that decides it's smarter than creators. His voice carried weight. That's existential problem with no easy solutions. My sympathies, Chief. That's war I wouldn't wish on anyone. Before Chief could respond, Cortana's voice cut through with urgency that made routine sensor analysis sound like immediate crisis. Chief, movement detected. Multiple contacts. Range, 300 meters. Closing fast. Configuration doesn't match any biological baseline I recognize. There. She paused, processing data that violated expected parameters. They're not natural. Energy signatures suggest they're manifested from the same ambient field that saturates this environment. Chief, I think we're about to engage hostiles that are literally conjured from magic, rather than evolved through biology. Standard threat assessment may not apply. Through forest, sounds emerged that made both soldiers' combat instincts activate automatically. inhuman screeching that biological vocal cords shouldn't produce, movement that suggested coordination beyond animal pack hunting, and underneath it all, human screaming that indicated civilians under attack. Chief's tactical overlay updated with thermal signatures showing approximately 24 entities pursuing group of what appeared to be unarmed baseline humans, the chase vector bringing both hostiles and civilians directly toward his and Raynor's position. "Civilians in danger," Chief stated with voice carrying certainty that made observation sound like mission parameter. "Unknown hostiles. Defensive engagement. We protect the non-combatants. Questions about where we are come after ensuring no one dies while we're standing around confused. You combat capable." "Chief," Raynor replied with voice carrying slight humor despite tactical situation. "I've been fighting since before you were probably born if your universe's timeline matches mine even roughly. Zerg rushes make Covenant assaults look organized. I'm combat capable. Question is," he raised Gauss' rifle, "are you ready to find out what happens when Terran Marine and UNSC Spartan fight magical nightmare creatures together? Because I'm genuinely curious about tactical synergy between our capabilities." The first creatures burst through tree line with violence that made their unnatural origin immediately apparent. Bipedal forms that looked like humans twisted by biological corruption, skin mottled with patterns that hurt to observe directly, weapons that appeared grown rather than forged, and most disturbing, eyes that suggested intelligence directing assault rather than simple animal aggression. Behind them, civilians ran with terror that made their desperation clear. Men, women, children fleeing from threat they couldn't fight, hoping distance would provide safety that combat capability couldn't. Chief's assessment completed in milliseconds. Hostiles would overtake civilians within 30 seconds. Casualties would be total if intervention didn't occur. A defensive position using forest cover would maximize protection while minimizing exposure. "Raynor, suppressing fire," Chief commanded with authority that assumed cooperation despite having known this soldier for less than 5 minutes. "Keep hostiles focused on us. I'll extract civilians to defensive position. Then we eliminate threats with prejudice. Standard seek and destroy. Understood?" "Crystal," Raynor confirmed, his CMC suit's targeting systems achieving locks that Gauss' rifle's magnetic accelerator would execute with devastating efficiency. "And Chief," his voice carried weight, "welcome to whatever insane reality we've landed in. Let's make sure these people survive long enough to explain where we are. Fire in 3, 2, 1. The Gauss rifle spoke with report that made conventional firearms sound restrained. Hypersonic tungsten spike accelerated by magnetic coils, projectile velocity generating sonic boom that made atmosphere protest physical abuse, impact delivering kinetic energy that turned first hostile creature into explosion of organic matter that conventional biology couldn't survive. Chief moved simultaneously with speed that MJOLNIR's enhancement provided, closing distance to civilians with sprint velocity that made Olympic athletes look stationary, interposing armored bulk between fleeing non-combatants and pursuing hostiles, while MA-40 engaged targets with 3-round burst discipline that Spartan training had made automatic. "Get behind me," Chief commanded toward civilians with voice amplified through external speakers. Mjolnir's shields flaring as hostile weapons, projectiles that looked biological rather than manufactured, impacted energy barriers designed to withstand Covenant plasma. "Stay low, move to cover, we're UNSC, we're here to help." The civilians, approximately 17 individuals ranging from children to elderly, clothing suggesting pre-industrial society, obeyed with survival instinct that transcended confusion about what UNSC meant, recognizing that armored soldiers standing between them and nightmares represented salvation regardless of origin. Raynor's Gauss rifle continued methodical elimination of hostiles with precision that decades of combat had refined, each shot calculated to maximize lethality while conserving ammunition that couldn't be resupplied in unknown environment, as in targeting priority given to creatures threatening to flank Chief's defensive position. "These things adapt fast," Raynor transmitted through whatever communication system allowed their armor to interface despite different technological bases. Hit one in center mass, next one shifted organs. That's Zerg-level evolution speed except without biological hive mind coordinating. Chief, what the hell are we fighting? Unknown, Chief confirmed, while engaging hostiles at close range where MA-40's rate of fire provided overwhelming advantage. His enhanced strength allowing him to physically strike creatures that closed to melee distance. Armored fist, delivering impacts that shattered what passed for skeletal structure. Cortana classifies them as wave monsters, entities manifested during dimensional incursion events. Locals call them products of catastrophic magical phenomenon. Threat assessment, extreme. These things are designed to kill, efficiently. We eliminate them all. No survivors to threaten civilians. Understood? Understood, Raynor confirmed, switching Gauss rifle to full auto despite ammunition concerns, recognizing that overwhelming firepower was necessary when facing enemies that adapted to conventional tactics. And Chief, his voice carried grim humor. If this is what passes for welcome wagon in Magic World, I'm really not looking forward to meeting actual military forces. These are supposed to be random spawns. Imagine what deliberate weapons look like. The battle lasted exactly 7 minutes and 43 seconds by Chief's combat timer. Efficient elimination of hostiles that normal military force would have struggled to contain. Combination of Spartan precision and Terran firepower, creating synergy that made numerical superiority irrelevant. When last creature fell with Gauss spike through what passed for brain, silence descended with weight that combat's end always carried. Survivors recognizing they'd lived through engagement that statistics said should have killed them. Chief performed tactical assessment automatically. 17 civilians present, 0 casualties, all hostiles eliminated, ammunition expenditure within acceptable parameters, Mjolnir shields at 67% capacity. Successful engagement by any metric. The civilians stared at him and Raynor with expressions mixing gratitude and awe and fear. Recognition that their saviors were forces beyond comprehension, warriors whose capabilities transcended anything their world normally produced. One stepped forward. Young man with shield strapped to back, clothing suggesting he was different from other civilians, bearing that indicated combat experience despite youth. "Thank you," the young man said, with voice carrying across clearing where bodies of wave monsters were already dissolving into energy that ambient field reclaimed. "You saved us. Those creatures, they appeared during the wave. We were fleeing toward town when they cut us off. Without your intervention, we'd all be—" He couldn't finish. Recognition of how close death had been making words inadequate. "Who are you?" Chief asked with characteristic directness, recognizing that this individual wasn't standard civilian despite initial assessment. "Your stance suggests military training, and that shield," his tactical overlay flagged it as significant. "That's not standard equipment. You're soldier. What unit? What command structure? And where are we?" The young man blinked with confusion that suggested Chief's questions didn't make sense in local context. "I'm Naofumi Iwatani, the shield hero, summoned by Melromark to fight the waves and protect this world from dimensional catastrophe. And you?" He studied Chief and Raynor with growing bewilderment. "You're not from here either, are you? Your armor, your weapons, the way you fight. That's not magic. That's not anything this world has ever seen. You were summoned too. Are you heroes from another world?" Chief and Raynor exchanged glance despite helmets preventing actual eye contact, recognition passing between them through body language that combat veterans developed. "We're soldiers," Chief stated with voice carrying certainty despite circumstances suggesting nothing was certain. "From different universes than yours. Displaced here through means we don't understand, and we're going to need explanations. Starting with what waves are, why dimensional catastrophe is apparently normal occurrence, and what shield hero means in tactical context. But first," he gestured toward civilians who were looking at both soldiers with mixture of hope and confusion. "We get these people to safety. Then we establish operational parameters for whatever situation we've been inserted into. Acceptable, and Raynor? Works for me," Raynor confirmed with pragmatism born from similar situations across Koprulu. "Save people first, figure out insane reality later. That's—" his voice carried slight humor. That's apparently universal constant, regardless of which dimension you're from. Lead on, shield hero. We'll follow. For now. Until we understand what we're protecting and whether your summoning was legitimate request for help or trap that we need to escape. No offense. None taken. Naofumi replied with expression suggesting he understood that suspicion, having apparently experienced similar complications. And welcome to Melromark, where legendary heroes are summoned to save world from apocalypse. Except... He studied both soldiers with growing recognition. Except I think you two might be legends that summoning system didn't account for. This is going to be complicated. Very complicated. But his expression shifted to determination. If you're willing to help protect people, complications can wait. Follow me. Town is 3 kilometers north. We'll get civilians to safety. Then we figure out what happens when super soldiers from other universes become extras in story that wasn't written for them. Chief fell into escort formation automatically, Mjolnir's sensors scanning for additional threats while protecting civilian group. Raynor matched pace with casual competence that suggested this was far from his first time protecting refugees through hostile territory. And as they moved through forest toward civilization that neither had prepared for, I both recognized same tactical reality. They were stranded in universe where magic was real, physics was negotiable, and their role had yet to be determined. But some things transcended dimensional boundaries, like protecting people who couldn't protect themselves, like refusing to abandon mission just because mission parameters made no sense, like recognizing that sometimes the best way to understand insane situation was to fight through it until understanding emerged naturally. They were extras in story neither had chosen, but they were damn well going to make their presence count. Melromark. Castletown. 12 hours after arrival. The inn felt wrong in ways that transcended simple unfamiliarity. Wooden construction that made starship bulkheads and Terran barracks look advanced. Lighting provided by what the innkeeper called magic stones, rather than electrical systems. And everywhere the smell of cooking food that neither synthetic rations nor mess hall fare had prepared them to recognize. Master Chief stood near the window with Mjolnir armor still fully engaged, despite Cortana's assessment suggesting no immediate threat. His enhanced vision tracking pedestrians who moved through streets with casual acceptance of reality where magic existed, and dimensional displacement was apparently common enough that local government had summoning protocols. Cortana, Chief transmitted through neural interface that made sub-vocalization unnecessary. Status update on dimensional analysis. Can we establish return vector to UNSC space? Negative, Cortana replied with AI processing speed that made frustration sound clinical rather than emotional, her avatar flickering across his HUD with calculations that violated established physics. Chief, the energy signatures that brought us here don't match slip space, don't correspond to Forerunner translocation, don't even resemble Covenant technology. This is something else, something that operates on principles our science doesn't recognize. I'm detecting what locals call mana, ambient energy field that permeates reality here, allowing violation of thermodynamic laws through methods I can't fully categorize. We're not just on different planet. We're in reality where fundamental constants are negotiable. That's, her voice carried weight. That situation requiring complete operational reassessment. Standard tactics might not apply when enemy can literally conjure fire from nothing or summon creatures that shouldn't biologically exist. Across the room, Jim Raynor sat at rough wooden table cleaning his C-14 Gauss rifle, with movements that decades of combat had made habitual, his CMC armor powered down to conserve energy, but still providing enhanced strength that made furniture designed for baseline humans feel fragile. You know, Raynor observed with voice carrying across small room despite speaking conversationally, I fought Zerg that could adapt to weapons in real time, Protoss with technology that made psionics look like party tricks, and Terran Dominion forces equipped with everything Marsara could manufacture. But I've never fought in world where kid with shield can block my Gauss rifle rounds using magic barrier that physics says shouldn't work. That's, he paused, checking rifle's magnetic accelerator coils. That's tactical situation requiring different approach than shoot it until it stops moving. These waves, they mentioned, dimensional rifts spawning monsters, sound like they operate on rules neither Koprulu nor UNSC ever encountered. We're going to need to learn fast or die confused. Before Chief could respond, footsteps approached their room with urgency that suggested immediate crisis rather than casual visit. Rapid pace, multiple individuals, weapons audible through enhanced audio sensors. The door opened without courtesy of knocking, and revealing young man with shield that Chief's tactical assessment immediately flagged as significant. Not conventional riot shield or energy barrier, but artifact that radiated presence, suggesting it was object of power rather than simple defensive equipment. Naofumi Iwatani, the shield hero their arrival had apparently complicated, stood in doorway with expression mixing determination and frustration that suggested he'd been dealing with bureaucratic complications for hours. "We've got problems," Naofumi stated with directness that Chief appreciated despite circumstances being far from ideal. "The kingdom's officials want to meet you, both of you. They're calling you irregulars, heroes summoned outside normal protocols. Some think you're blessing from gods. Others think you're a threat that needs to be controlled. And the other cardinal heroes?" His expression soured. "They're not happy that 2 additional combatants appeared who didn't go through proper summoning ritual. Politics are getting complicated fast. I need you to understand something before we go to castle." "Understood," Chief confirmed with Spartan efficiency. "Brief us. What's tactical situation? Who are we meeting? What's their disposition toward us? And what's our operational authority in this scenario?" Naofumi blinked at the rapid-fire questions before responding with similar efficiency. "You're meeting King Alt-Cray and his advisors. They control Melromark's military and decide how heroes are deployed. Disposition is uncertain. You saved civilians during wave outbreak, which gives you credibility, but your technology scares them because they don't understand it. As operational authority is undefined. Technically, you're not cardinal heroes bound by summoning contract, which means they can't compel your service. But politically, they'll pressure you to fight waves because world-ending catastrophe makes refusing look bad. And the other heroes, spear, sword, and bow, they treat this like game, like RPG with stats and levels. They're going to underestimate you badly. That could work to your advantage or create friction depending on how you handle it." "Treating Apocalypse like game," Raynor repeated with voice carrying disgust that Terran pragmatism made instinctive. "I've seen that before. New recruits who thought war was adventure until Zerg tore through their positions and reality made philosophy irrelevant. How competent are these heroes? Can they actually fight, or are we looking at liability that political structure prevents us from addressing?" "Mixed," Naofumi admitted with honesty that suggested he'd made similar assessment. "They've got power. Magical weapons that grow stronger through combat experience, abilities that let them do things baseline humans can't. But they lack discipline. Treat NPCs." He caught himself. Treat people like characters rather than actual humans. That makes them dangerous not because they're malicious, but because they're careless. And in a world where dimensional catastrophe kills thousands, carelessness equals mass casualties. His voice dropped. "I'm trying to keep civilians alive despite other heroes' recklessness. Having 2 actual soldiers who understand tactics and treat people like people rather than quest objectives, that's resource I desperately need. But I can't order you to help. You weren't summoned through binding ritual. You're free agents. So I'm asking, will you help? Not the kingdom, not the heroes. The people who are going to die if waves aren't stopped properly." Chief absorbed the plea with tactical mind that had processed similar requests across 30 years of combat, recognizing that Naofumi was soldier rather than politician despite his youth, someone who understood that protecting civilians mattered more than political convenience. "We'll help," Chief decided with certainty that made commitment sound like established fact, not because of summoning ritual or political pressure, because preventing mass casualties is mission parameter that transcends dimensional boundaries. Cortana, update operational priorities. Primary objective, stabilize dimensional incursions preventing civilian casualties. Secondary objective, Establish return vector to UNSC space. Tertiary objective. Avoid political entanglement that compromises primary mission. Confirm. Confirmed. Cortana acknowledged with tone suggesting approval of priority structure. Chief, I'm flagging potential issue. If local government expects us to operate under their command authority and we maintain independent operational status, that creates friction that could escalate to hostility. Recommend we establish clear boundaries early. Make it explicit that we're cooperating, not subordinating. That prevents misunderstandings that turn allies into obstacles. Agreed, Chief confirmed before turning attention back to Naofumi. We'll meet your king. We'll clarify operational parameters. We don't take orders from political authority we haven't vetted. We don't fight battles where civilian protection isn't priority. And we don't compromise tactical integrity for diplomatic convenience. If he accepts those terms, we coordinate efforts. If not, his voice carried weight. We operate independently, and he deals with fact that 2 combat veterans are protecting his people whether he authorizes it or not. That acceptable to you? More than acceptable, Naofumi replied with expression mixing relief and something approaching gratitude. That's exactly what this world needs. People who fight for right reasons rather than personal glory or political advantage. The other heroes, he paused. They're going to hate you. They're used to being special, being most powerful individuals in room. You two show up with technology and experience that makes their game world assumptions look inadequate, that threatens their self-image. Expect hostility masked as skepticism. Expect challenges designed to prove they're superior, and when you demonstrate capabilities they can't match. His expression shifted to grim satisfaction. Expect them to get vindictive. Fair warning. Noted, Raynor confirmed, with voice suggesting he'd dealt with similar personality types across Koprulu's sector. Jim Raynor, Marshal of Marsara, doesn't play well with glory hounds who treat war like entertainment. If these heroes want to measure equipment, I'm happy to educate them about difference between fantasy and reality. Politely, at first, then less politely if they push. Chief, he looked toward Spartan. How do you want to handle meeting? Diplomatic, or do we establish dominance early by demonstrating why pissing off combat veterans is poor life choice? Diplomatic, Chief decided with pragmatism that recognized unnecessary conflict consumed resources better spent elsewhere. We're not here to fight local heroes. We're here to prevent dimensional catastrophe. If they want to cooperate, excellent. If they want to compete, we ignore them and focus on mission. If they actively obstruct civilian protection, his voice dropped to register that made temperature seem negotiable. Then we remove obstruction through minimum necessary force and deal with political consequences afterward. But we don't initiate conflict. We're professionals. We act like it. Melromark Royal Castle, Throne Room. 1 hour later. The chamber exemplified everything Chief associated with pre-industrial monarchies. Ostentatious decoration prioritizing intimidation over function. Elevated thrones suggesting authority through physical positioning. Guards whose ceremonial armor made tactical mobility secondary to aesthetic impression. King Alt-Cray Melromark, 32, sat upon throne with expression mixing royal authority and barely concealed nervousness. His eyes tracking between Chief's MJOLNIR armor and Raynor's CMC suit, with recognition that these warriors represented force his guards couldn't counter. Flanking the king, 3 young men bearing weapons that radiated magical presence. Spear that gleamed with unnatural light. Sword that seemed sharper than metallurgy should allow. Bow that suggested arrows fired would track targets impossibly. The Cardinal Heroes. Summoned from Japan according to Naofumi's brief, treating apocalyptic threat like RPG adventure. Chief's tactical assessment cataloged them automatically. Motoyasu Kitamura, spear hero. Stance suggesting athletic background but no military training. Overconfident body language indicating he'd never faced opponent who outmatched him. Ren Amaki, sword hero. Posture attempting martial discipline but lacking refinement that actual combat provided. Itsuki Kawasumi, bow hero. Intellectual bearing suggesting he approached conflict as puzzle rather than life or death struggle. All three studied Chief and Raynor with expressions mixing curiosity and dismissiveness, recognition that newcomers were unusual, but assumption that Cardinal Hero's legendary status made them inherently superior. "Welcome," King Altcray began with voice carrying across throne room with practiced authority. "To Melromark. I am told you appeared during recent wave outbreak, that you engaged monsters with technology unlike anything our world has seen, that you saved civilians when our own forces were overwhelmed. For this, you have kingdom's gratitude. But we must understand, who are you? What nation sent you? And why did summoning ritual produce warriors outside the Cardinal Heroes system?" "We weren't sent," Chief replied with characteristic directness, his voice filtering through Mjolnir's external speakers with electronic precision that made organic vocal cords sound inadequate. "We were displaced here through dimensional anomaly we don't fully understand. I'm Master Chief Petty Officer John 117, United Nations Space Command. My companion is Marshal Jim Raynor, formerly of Mar Sara Colonial Militia. We're from different universes than yours, different realities with different physical laws. Your summoning ritual didn't produce us. Whatever tore holes between dimensions brought us here as side effect. He processed appropriate terminology. We're unintended consequences of magical phenomenon your civilization doesn't fully control." Silence descended with weight that transcended normal pause. Might recognition that Chief's explanation violated everything summoning theology claimed about heroes being chosen by gods rather than displaced through random catastrophe. "Different universes," Motoyasu repeated with voice mixing skepticism and amusement, his spear shifting casually in grip that suggested he was contemplating demonstration of superiority. "That's creative excuse for refusing to acknowledge proper summoning authority. But if you're really from different realities," his tone made quotation marks audible, "then prove it. Show us technology that our world hasn't developed. Demonstrate capabilities that make your claims credible rather than elaborate deception designed to avoid heroes' responsibilities." "Not interested in proving anything," Raynor interjected with Terran bluntness that made diplomatic courtesy seem inefficient. "We're not here to impress you, kid. We're here because dimensional catastrophe is apparently killing people, and soldiers don't watch civilians die when intervention is possible. You want demonstration of capabilities? Wait until next wave. Watch how actual combat veterans handle threats. Then decide whether our creative excuses matter compared to body count we prevent. Until then," his stance shifted fractionally, "maybe show respect to people who've been fighting wars since before you discovered what mortality actually means. We're not competition. We're not rivals. We're soldiers who happen to share battlefield. Act accordingly." Motoyasu's expression darkened with anger that suggested he wasn't accustomed to being addressed with anything less than deference, his grip tightening on spear that legendary weapon's power made devastatingly dangerous in melee engagement. "You dare speak to Cardinal Hero with such—" "Enough," King Altcray interrupted with authority that made personal offense secondary to political calculation. "The irregulars make valid point. Their combat effectiveness during wave outbreak is documented. Guards reported elimination of monster pack that should have required hero intervention. Whatever their origin, they possess capabilities our kingdom cannot afford to dismiss. The question becomes," his eyes tracked between Chief and Raynor, "will you fight for Melromark? Will you defend our people against waves? Compensation can be negotiated, status can be granted, but we require commitment. The world faces apocalypse. Everyone must contribute." "We'll fight waves," Chief confirmed, with voice carrying certainty despite political complexity surrounding commitment. "Not for Melromark, not for compensation or status. For the civilians who die if dimensional incursions aren't contained. That's non-negotiable priority. But understand, we don't operate under your command structure. We don't take orders from political authority we haven't verified. We coordinate with your forces when tactical situation permits. We act independently when coordination would compromise mission effectiveness. And we prioritize civilian protection over political objectives, regardless of royal preference. Those are operational parameters. Accept them, or we operate as free agents, and you deal with fact that 2 combat veterans are protecting your people whether you authorize it or not." The king's expression suggested he recognized this was negotiation where his authority held less weight than it should. Recognition that warriors who'd saved civilians without prompting weren't assets that could be controlled through traditional power structures. "Your terms are unusual," Alt-Cray said carefully, his political instincts apparently warning against pushing too hard against force he couldn't compel. "But acceptable given circumstances. You'll coordinate with SHIELD hero Naofumi. He operates under similar independent status due to complications with other heroes. Perhaps your shared outsider position will facilitate cooperation. And..." His voice carried warning. "Do not interfere with Cardinal Hero's operations. They are chosen by gods. Their methods may seem unconventional, but they are blessed by legend itself. Understood?" "Understood," Chief confirmed, while privately noting that warning suggested King knew his Cardinal Heroes were problematic, but lacked authority to control them. "We'll avoid interference, unless their operations threaten civilians. Then we intervene regardless of legendary status. God's blessing doesn't exempt anyone from tactical accountability when innocent people are at risk. That's..." His voice carried absolute certainty. "That's principle that transcends dimensional boundaries. We're clear on that?" The king's expression suggested he recognized this was as much concession as he'd received from warriors who demonstrated capability and conviction that political pressure couldn't override. "Crystal clear," Alt-Cray replied with tone mixing resignation and relief. "You're dismissed. Naofumi will coordinate your lodging and provide intelligence on wave patterns and irregulars." His voice softened fractionally. "Thank you for saving our people. Whatever brought you here, Melromark is fortunate you chose to help, rather than simply seeking return to your homes. That choice matters." As they departed throne room, Motoyasu's voice carried with volume, suggesting it was meant to be overheard. "Did you see their equipment? Primitive projectile weapons, no magic, no levels, no stats. They'll be dead within first real wave encounter. Heroes don't need fossils weighing us down. This world has legendary warriors, not relics from dimensions too backwards to develop proper combat systems." Chief's tactical overlay recorded the comment for future reference, filing it under potential complications requiring management if Cardinal Hero's arrogance threatens operational effectiveness. Raynor's chuckle transmitted through suit communications. "Oh, I'm going to enjoy proving that kid wrong, immensely. Chief, permission to educate spoiled heroes about difference between game mechanics and actual warfare next time they get civilians killed through negligence?" "Permission granted," Chief confirmed with voice carrying approval despite professional tone. "But we do it properly, through demonstration rather than confrontation. We let results speak louder than arguments. They want to treat this like game with themselves as main characters? Fine. We'll be extras who steal every scene through competence they can't match. That's..." His voice carried satisfaction. "That's how professionals operate. Not through posturing, through performance that makes posturing irrelevant." As they walked through castle corridors toward exit, Naofumi fell into step beside them, with expression mixing approval and concern. "You handled that better than I expected," the SHIELD hero observed, with voice suggesting he'd been worried about different outcome. "King usually doesn't accept independent operational status. You must have impressed him, or scared him, probably both. But fair warning, the other heroes are going to make this difficult. They'll challenge you. Try to prove their superiority. Create situations designed to demonstrate why legendary weapons make them special and your technology makes you obsolete. He paused. "It's exhausting dealing with their egos, and dangerous when their need to be special overrides tactical common sense. Let them try," Raynor said with voice carrying confidence born from decades of combat against enemies that made arrogant heroes look trivial. "I've dealt with Mengsk's propaganda. I've survived Kerrigan's Zerg. I've watched Protoss demonstrate technology that makes magic look primitive. 3 kids with legendary weapons and entitlement issues? That's Tuesday. We'll handle them. Through patience, through professionalism, and when patience runs out..." His tone shifted. "Through reminding them why combat veterans earn respect, rather than demanding it through divine mandate." One way or another, this world is going to learn that sometimes extras are more important than main characters. We just need to prove it. And in throne room behind them, Cardinal heroes plotted demonstrations designed to put irregulars in their place, unaware that they were challenging soldiers whose capabilities transcended anything their game world assumptions could comprehend. The first wave was coming, and it would determine whether Melromark's legendary system could adapt to warriors who operated outside its rules, or whether those rules would break under pressure of reality meeting legend. Melromark, Eastern Border. Wave Outbreak Zone. 72 hours after Castle meeting. The sky tore itself apart with violence that made dimensional breaches look gentle, reality fracturing along fault lines that conventional physics couldn't explain, space-time folding inward to reveal glimpses of dimensions where organic life shouldn't exist, and pouring through the ruptures, creatures that violated every principle of evolutionary biology. Master Chief stood at defensive perimeter watching Apocalypse manifest with Spartan tactical assessment that cataloged threats faster than normal cognition could process, his Mjolnir's sensors tracking hundreds of contacts emerging from the wave, with coordination that suggested hive intelligence directing assault rather than random monster spawning. Cortana, Chief transmitted through neural interface while checking MA-40's ammunition status. Threat analysis. Compare current wave manifestation to initial encounter. Are we seeing evolution in enemy tactics, or is this standard escalation pattern? Both, Cortana replied with AI processing speed that made human analysis look glacial, her avatar overlaying tactical data across his HUD with precision that made chaos look organized. Wave monsters are demonstrating improved coordination compared to initial outbreak. They're adapting to local defensive patterns, learning from previous encounters, and Chief, her voice carried concern that transcended normal tactical updates. I'm detecting energy signatures that match profiles from our universe. Not exactly, but similar enough to suggest dimensional breach is pulling material from multiple realities simultaneously. We might be fighting creatures that originated from flood-infected dimensions or covenant battle zones. That's contamination across dimensional boundaries that makes this threat exponentially worse than local authorities understand. Approximately 40 meters to Chief's right, Jim Raynor occupied elevated position with Gauss rifle deployed on improvised bipod. His CMC armor's targeting systems establishing firing solutions on wave monsters with efficiency that decades of combat had refined into instinct. Chief, Raynor transmitted through whatever communication protocol allowed their disparate technologies to interface. I'm seeing organisms that look like Zerg derivatives. Not exact matches, but close enough to make me nervous. Carapace structure, regeneration capabilities, swarm tactics. If dimensional breach is pulling biological material from Koprulu, we could be facing adaptive evolution that makes standard wave monsters look manageable by comparison. Recommend we establish kill zones that prevent any contamination from reaching civilian population. Can't risk Zerg analogs establishing infestation in world without technological base to counter them. Agreed, Chief confirmed, while his tactical overlay updated with defensive positions showing Melromark's conventional forces. Knights in plate armor that made protection secondary to ceremony. Mages whose magical abilities operated on principles UNSC science couldn't explain. And positioned at forward defensive line. Cardinal heroes whose legendary weapons radiated presence that made normal armament look inadequate. Motoyasu Kitamura, spear hero, stood at vanguard with weapon held in stance, suggesting he expected adulation for his positioning. His armor gleaming with enchantments that made defensive capability secondary to visual impression. "Everyone stay behind me," Motoyasu called with voice carrying across defensive line, with confidence that transcended tactical necessity. "I'm Spear Hero, level 43. My stats make me perfect tank for this encounter. You NPCs just support with ranged attacks and let legendary weapons handle real combat. This is what heroes do!" Raynor's disgusted snort transmitted clearly. Did he just call soldiers NPCs, Chief? And permission to educate spoiled kid about difference between game mechanics and actual warfare when people's lives depend on competent tactical coordination. Denied, Chief replied with voice carrying authority despite sharing Raynor's frustration. We demonstrate through performance, not lectures. Let him maintain forward position. We'll cover flanks his arrogance leaves exposed. When wave monsters exploit gaps his ego creates, we prevent civilian casualties he doesn't prioritize. Then he learns through consequence rather than argument. That's more effective education than anything we could say. The wave intensified with coordinated assault that made random monster spawning look organized. Creatures emerging from dimensional tiers with tactical precision that suggested intelligence directing deployment. Targeting defensive positions with efficiency that conventional bestial aggression couldn't achieve. Chief engaged with 3-round burst discipline that Spartan training made automatic. His MA-40 eliminating threats with precision that made each bullet count. Prioritizing targets that flanked Motoyasu's position, where spear heroes' focus on personal glory left defensive gaps. The monsters that died under Chief's fire dissolved into energy that ambient mana field reclaimed, their biological material returning to whatever dimensional substrate spawned them, leaving no corpses to analyze or tactical intelligence to gather. Contact right, Raynor transmitted while Gauss rifles spoke with hypersonic report that made atmosphere protest kinetic abuse. Wave monsters attempting to bypass forward defense, engaging. Chief, see, these things are learning our firing patterns. They're using terrain cover that earlier spawns ignored. That's adaptation speed that shouldn't be possible unless they're sharing tactical data through Hive network. Confirmed, Chief acknowledged while repositioning to cover approach vector Raynor had identified. Cortana, update threat assessment. If wave monsters demonstrate collective learning, standard attrition tactics become inadequate. We need to identify command nodes coordinating assault, eliminate leadership elements, force swarm back to individual action rather than coordinated strategy. Working on it, Cortana confirmed with processing intensity that made her avatar flicker. Chief, I'm detecting energy concentration approximately 200 meters beyond dimensional tear. Signature suggests command organism, larger than standard spawns. If my analysis is correct, eliminating that target disrupts swarm coordination, but it's positioned behind primary assault wave. You'd need to penetrate enemy formation to engage. That's exposure level that even MJOLNIR shields might not survive against concentrated fire. Before Chief could respond to tactical challenge, reality demonstrated why Cardinal heroes possessed legendary status despite their problematic personalities. Motoyasu's spear activated with luminescence that made magical energy visible to unenhanced perception, the weapon channeling power through methods that violated thermodynamic conservation, releasing assault that made Chief's weapons look restrained by comparison. Lightning spear, Motoyasu called with voice mixing combat focus and theatrical flair. His legendary weapon projecting electrical discharge that arced across battlefield with seeking behavior that conventional physics couldn't explain, striking dozens of wave monsters simultaneously with energy that reduced organic matter to component atoms. The effect was devastating. Entire section of enemy formation eliminated through single attack that standard military force would require artillery bombardment to replicate. Motoyasu's legendary weapon demonstrating capabilities that made technological superiority negotiable when magic was involved. Okay, Raynor admitted with voice carrying grudging respect despite his earlier dismissiveness. That's actually impressive. Kid's got firepower, I'll give him that. Still treats people like NPCs and his tactical positioning is garbage. But the weapon itself, that's force multiplier comparable to Protoss' psionic storm. We might need to recalibrate assessment of what these heroes can actually do when they stop posturing and start fighting seriously. Chief's tactical analysis agreed with Raynor's assessment while simultaneously identifying the problem that superior firepower created. Motoyasu's devastating attack had eliminated immediate threats while leaving Spear Hero overextended, his position now isolated from supporting forces, surrounded by secondary wave that his initial assault hadn't reached. And the wave monsters, demonstrating exactly the adaptive intelligence Chief had been tracking, recognized vulnerability and exploited it with coordination that made opportunistic tactics look like strategic planning. Wave monsters converged on Motoyasu's position with numbers that made individual superiority irrelevant. Their assault coordinated to overwhelm legendary weapons' defensive capabilities through sheer volume, rather than matching power directly. "Motoyasu's surrounded," one of the Melromark knights called, with voice carrying alarm that suggested recognition of catastrophic tactical failure. "Someone support the hero. If he falls, defensive line collapses." Chief's tactical assessment completed in milliseconds. Motoyasu could survive approximately 47 seconds against current concentration before Wave Monster's numerical advantage overwhelmed legendary weapons' capabilities. Supporting forces were positioned too far back to provide timely assistance. And civilian evacuation route ran directly through position Spear Hero was about to lose. Mission parameter was clear. Prevent Hero's death despite his arrogance creating the situation. "Raynor, suppressing fire on my position," Chief commanded while already moving toward Motoyasu's location with sprint velocity that Mjolnir enhancement provided. "Keep Wave Monster's attention divided. I'm extracting our overextended Glory Hound before his ego gets him killed and compromises defensive integrity. Once he's clear, we eliminate command node and force swarm retreat. Understood?" "Crystal," Raynor confirmed, his Gauss rifle shifting to full auto despite ammunition concerns. Tungsten spikes creating suppression corridor that made Wave Monster's approach vector catastrophically dangerous. "And Chief, try not to let him thank you too enthusiastically. His ego might not survive being rescued by primitive NPC with obsolete projectile weapons. Would hate to damage his fragile self-image." Chief reached Motoyasu's position with exactly 2.3 seconds before Wave Monster's coordinated assault would have breached Spear Hero's defensive perimeter, his armored bulk interposing between overextended Hero and creatures that treated human flesh as consumable resource. "Get behind me," Chief commanded with voice amplified through external speakers, his Mjolnir shields flaring as Wave Monster's bioweapons struck energy barriers designed to withstand Covenant plasma. "Fall back to secondary line. Your forward position is compromised. Or move now." Motoyasu's expression mixed shock and indignation. Recognition that his legendary status hadn't prevented tactical failure, but apparently unwillingness to accept that rescue was necessary. "I don't need help from NPC," Motoyasu protested, even while backing towards safer position. "I'm Hero, level 43. My stats—" "Your stats don't matter when you're surrounded by enemies exploiting gaps your positioning created," Chief interrupted while engaging Wave Monsters at close range, where MA-40's rate of fire provided overwhelming advantage. "Professional soldiers don't measure capability through numerical abstractions. We measure through whether civilians survive our tactical decisions. Now move before your pride gets people killed." The rebuke, delivered with absolute authority despite Chief technically having no command position, made Motoyasu actually comply with shocked recognition that someone had just ordered Cardinal Hero around without concern for legendary status. With Spear Hero extracted to safer position, Chief's tactical focus shifted to primary objective. Eliminate command node coordinating wave assault. Force swarm back to individual action. Allow conventional forces to handle cleanup. "Cortana, mark command organism," Chief transmitted while advancing toward enemy concentration. That tactical doctrine said was suicidal to engage alone. "I'm going direct assault. Upload firing solution to Raynor. When I engage command node, he provides precision fire on supporting organisms. Coordinate timing for maximum effectiveness." "Chief, this is extremely high-risk approach," Cortana warned with concern that transcended normal tactical caution. "You're advancing into concentrated enemy formation without support. Even Mjolnir shields have limits. If you get overwhelmed, then Raynor completes mission and extracts my armor for intelligence value," Chief replied with Spartan pragmatism that made mortality sound like acceptable operational parameter. "But that's contingency, not primary plan. I've fought through worse odds against better coordinated enemies. These Wave Monsters are dangerous, but they're not Covenant elite honor guards or flood combat forms. They're manageable threat if engaged with appropriate tactics." Executing assault. Now, what followed would be analyzed by Melromark military strategists for years. How single soldier advanced through enemy formation that should have killed him through overwhelming numbers. His movements making 18-meter monsters look slow through combination of enhanced reflexes and predictive tactical algorithms. Weapons eliminating threats with efficiency that made supernatural abilities look inefficient. Chief reached command organism, massive creature that looked like biological fusion of multiple wave monsters. Intelligence radiating from its form, suggesting it was Nexus coordinating swarm behavior, and engaged with systematic precision that made killing look like engineering problem requiring methodical solution. MA-40 ammunition depleted after sustained engagement. Chief transitioned to energy sword that Cortana had reverse-engineered from Covenant technology. The plasma blade cutting through command organism's carapace with thermal intensity that made organic defenses irrelevant. The creature died with psychic scream that made reality uncomfortable. Its death throes broadcasting across whatever network coordinated wave assault, swarm coordination collapsing as command intelligence was eliminated. Wave monsters reverted to individual action, still dangerous but manageable through conventional tactics rather than requiring legendary weapons to counter coordinated strategy. Raynor's voice transmitted with mixture of respect and exasperation. Chief, that was either brilliant tactical execution or suicidal insanity. I'm genuinely uncertain which, but it worked. Swarms broken. Conventional forces are mopping up stragglers, and the cardinal heroes are staring at you like you just violated fundamental laws of how their world is supposed to work. Pretty sure legendary weapons aren't supposed to be outperformed by primitive projectile technology, wielded by obsolete NPC. You just shattered their entire self-conception. This is going to be entertaining. As waves subsided and dimensional tiers sealed themselves with finality that suggested catastrophe had been temporary rather than permanent. Chief returned to defensive perimeter where Melromark forces were processing that irregular warrior had just demonstrated capabilities that made legendary status look insufficient. Motoyasu approached with expression mixing grudging respect and defensive arrogance. I clearly struggling with fact that he'd required rescue despite being chosen hero with divine mandate. That was acceptable performance, Motoyasu said with tone suggesting he was trying to maintain superiority, despite evidence contradicting his position. For NPC, but understand, I could have handled situation without intervention. My legendary spear has abilities you haven't seen yet, skills that would have eliminated threats before they became actual danger. You just expedited process that was already under my control. So, thank you, I suppose, for minor assistance that wasn't strictly necessary but was appreciated. The rationalization, Olympic-level mental gymnastics designed to avoid acknowledging that pride had created tactical failure requiring rescue, made Raynor's transmitted laughter barely audible. Kids got cognitive dissonance down to art form, Raynor observed privately. Can't admit he screwed up. Can't acknowledge that maybe legendary weapon doesn't automatically make him competent commander. So he reframes rescue as minor assistance and maintains fantasy that he's special. That's impressive self-delusion. Almost Mengsk-level propaganda skill except applied to personal mythology instead of political narrative. Chief didn't respond to Raynor's commentary, instead addressing Motoyasu with directness that made diplomatic courtesy seem inefficient. Acknowledged. In future engagements, recommend you maintain coordination with supporting forces rather than advancing beyond mutual support range. Legendary weapon provides significant offensive capability. Doesn't make tactical isolation survivable when enemies demonstrate adaptive coordination. Learn from this encounter. Adjust approach accordingly. That's how professional soldiers improve performance. Motoyasu's expression suggested he wanted to protest the implicit criticism, but recognition that Chief had just prevented his death made rebuttal seem ungrateful, creating internal conflict that left Spear Hero simply nodding with stiff acceptance before retreating toward other Cardinal heroes who'd witnessed entire engagement. As defensive forces began securing perimeter and assessing casualties, now Fumi approached with expression mixing satisfaction and concern that suggested Shield Hero had been watching entire engagement with professional assessment. You just made enemy of Spear Hero. Naofumi observed, with voice carrying weight, despite stating obvious fact. Motoyasu doesn't handle being shown up well, especially by someone he dismissed as primitive NPC. He's going to retaliate. Try to prove he's superior, create situations designed to demonstrate why legendary weapons make him special and your technology makes you irrelevant. He paused. It's going to get petty. And potentially dangerous when his ego overrides tactical common sense. Fair warning. Noted, Chief confirmed while his tactical overlay compiled after-action report. But personal rivalry is secondary concern compared to primary mission. Wave defense successful, civilian casualties, 0, defensive line maintained, command organism eliminated preventing prolonged engagement. By operational metrics. Or this was successful mission regardless of Cardinal Hero's wounded pride. If Motoyasu wants to prove superiority through future demonstrations, he's welcome to try. We'll continue prioritizing mission effectiveness over personal validation. His voice carried certainty. That's difference between soldiers and glory seekers. We measure success through results, not recognition. Across battlefield, Melro-Mark forces were processing that 2 irregular warriors had just demonstrated combat effectiveness that made legendary heroes' capabilities look supplemental rather than essential. Tactical coordination between UNSC Spartan and Terran Marshal, creating synergy that conventional doctrine couldn't replicate. And in Castle War Room, where King Altcray reviewed battle reports, the political calculation was determining that irregulars represented resource too valuable to ignore despite complications their independence created. But for Chief and Raynor, political implications mattered less than tactical reality. They'd proven that extras could outperform main characters when competence mattered more than destiny. Next wave would determine whether local forces learned from demonstration, or whether legendary systems' institutional inertia prevented adaptation. Either way, 2 combat veterans from different universes had established operational precedent. They weren't supporting caste waiting for heroes to save day. They were professionals ensuring mission success regardless of who received narrative credit. And sometimes, often, that made all the difference. Melro-Mark, Royal Strategy Chamber, 48 hours after Eastern Border Wave. The war room felt oppressively formal despite, or perhaps because of, the strategic crisis that had summoned every relevant authority to emergency session. King Altcray at head of massive oak table. Cardinal heroes positioned along one side with legendary weapons resting within easy reach. Military advisors occupying positions suggesting they were decorative rather than influential. And standing near the wall where they could observe without being central focus. Master Chief and Jim Raynor. Their armored presence making medieval aesthetics look inadequate. Reconnaissance reports confirm worst-case scenario, announced the kingdom's head strategist with voice carrying across chamber despite delivering information no one wanted to hear. The next wave is projected to manifest in 72 hours. Location, capital city itself. Magnitude, triple strength compared to standard outbreak. And most concerning, he activated magical display showing tactical projection. Dimensional tear will open directly above civilian district. Population density, 40,000. Evacuation window, insufficient. We're looking at catastrophic casualties unless defensive response achieves perfect execution. And, gentlemen, his eyes tracked toward Cardinal Heroes. Perfect execution requires coordination that previous engagements have not demonstrated. Silence descended with weight that transcended normal tactical pause. Recognition that strategist had just diplomatically stated that Hero's lack of teamwork was going to get people killed. Motoyasu shifted uncomfortably, his spear making quiet metallic sound against table edge, clearly wanting to protest the implied criticism, but unable to refute documented evidence that Cardinals operated as competing individuals rather than coordinated force. We've been effective, Ren Amaki, sword hero, finally said with voice attempting confidence despite defensive tone. Individual performance metrics show consistent improvement. My level increased by 7 after Eastern Border engagement. That's optimization that standard military forces can't replicate. If we continue focusing on personal development, collective capability increases naturally through improved stats. Except warfare doesn't work like RPG progression system, Raynor interjected from his position against wall, his voice carrying across chamber with Terran bluntness that made diplomatic courtesy seem inefficient. I've commanded forces across entire sector of space, fought campaigns where individual heroism mattered less than coordinated execution, and every time soldiers treated combat like personal achievement competition rather than collective survival effort, people died. Civilians, the ones you're supposedly here to protect. Your stats mean nothing if you're not positioned to use them effectively. Your legendary weapons are irrelevant if tactical coordination is so poor that enemies exploit gaps your egos create. This wave, capital city, 40,000 civilians, are triple standard magnitude. That scenario where individual performance optimization gets everyone killed, unless you start fighting like actual military unit, rather than solo players grinding experience. Motoyasu's expression darkened with anger that suggested he wasn't accustomed to being lectured by someone he'd classified as inferior, his hand moving toward spear in gesture that might have been unconscious threat display or simply nervous energy-seeking outlet. "And what would you know about legendary combat?" Motoyasu challenged with voice attempting dismissiveness despite underlying uncertainty. "Your NPC, irregular. Someone who happened to appear during wave but isn't part of proper summoning system. Your technology might be unusual, but it's not blessed by gods, not chosen by fate. You don't have stats, don't have levels, don't have divine mandate that makes heroes special. So maybe," his tone shifted to open hostility, "maybe you should let actual heroes determine tactics instead of pretending primitive projectile weapons make you qualified to judge legendary warriors." Before Raynor could respond with rebuttal that his expression suggested would be educational in unpleasant ways, Chief stepped forward with movement that made Mjolnir armor's bulk seem almost predatory, despite lack of aggressive posture. "Demonstrate," Chief said with voice carrying absolute authority despite single-word command. "If legendary weapons make coordination unnecessary, prove it, right now. We'll run tactical simulation, capital city defense scenario. You coordinate with other heroes using whatever methodology your stats suggest is optimal. We'll observe. Identify weaknesses. Provide feedback that might prevent civilian casualties when actual wave manifests. Unless..." His visor tracked across all three cardinal heroes with assessment that made them seem like specimens under examination. "Unless you're concerned that demonstration might reveal that divine mandate doesn't automatically confer tactical competence, in which case we skip simulation and implement defensive plan that prioritizes survival over protecting egos." The challenge, delivered with clinical precision that made it impossible to refuse without appearing cowardly, hung in air with weight that transcended normal strategic debate. King Altcray's expression suggested he recognized this was test that his heroes needed to pass, but probably wouldn't. On political calculation, warring with hope that maybe legendary system would prove adequate when reality demanded performance. "Fine," Motoyasu agreed with voice attempting confidence despite underlying defensiveness. "We'll demonstrate. Show you why heroes are chosen by gods, why legendary weapons trump primitive technology, and when we execute perfect defensive coordination," his expression shifted to smug certainty, "you'll acknowledge that maybe NPCs should defer to legendary warriors instead of pretending battlefield experience makes you our equals." The simulation began with magical projection, creating tactical scenario that made Chief's holographic displays look primitive by comparison. Three-dimensional representation of capital city, dimensional tear opening above civilian district, wave monsters manifesting with concentration that made previous encounters look manageable. Cardinal heroes coordinated using methodology that Chief's tactical assessment immediately flagged as catastrophically flawed. Each hero selected high-value target based on personal optimization rather than collective defense requirements, their positioning creating gaps that simulated wave monsters exploited with AI-driven efficiency. Civilian evacuation routes left undefended while heroes competed for elimination credit. Within simulated 12 minutes, projected casualties exceeded 15,000. "Stop," Chief commanded with voice cutting through simulation with authority that made suggestion sound like requirement. "Reset scenario. Current approach is tactically unsound. You're treating this like competition where highest elimination count equals victory. But mission parameter isn't maximizing personal performance. It's minimizing civilian casualties. Those require different optimization. Fundamentally different. You need to coordinate. Actually coordinate. Not just operate in same battlefield while pursuing individual objectives. Understand difference? We were coordinating. Itsuki protested with voice mixing defensiveness and genuine confusion. I focused on aerial threats. Ren handled ground forces. Motoyasu established forward position. That's division of labor. That's coordination. That's 3 individuals executing separate plans simultaneously. Raynor corrected with voice-carrying experience that made arguments sound like education rather than criticism. Coordination means your positioning supports each other. Means when one hero is threatened, others adjust to provide assistance. Means civilian protection is primary objective that shapes all tactical decisions. What you just demonstrated, he gestured at simulation results, showing catastrophic casualty projection. That's what happens when skilled combatants lack discipline to subordinate personal glory to collective mission. And before you protest that heroes shouldn't need to subordinate anything. His voice hardened. Understand that every civilian who dies because you prioritized elimination count over defensive positioning is failure that legendary weapons don't excuse. Gods didn't summon you to be celebrities. They summoned you to save people. Why act like it? The rebuke, delivered with absolute conviction despite Raynor technically having no authority over heroes, made all 3 cardinals pause with recognition that maybe irregular warriors had point that wounded pride shouldn't dismiss. Show us, Naofumi said quietly from his position observing simulation, his shield hero status making him simultaneously part of legendary system and outsider who understood its failures. If our coordination is inadequate, demonstrate proper execution. Run simulation with your methodology. Let us see what tactical competence actually looks like when protecting civilians is priority, rather than secondary consideration. Chief and Raynor exchanged glance despite helmets preventing actual eye contact, recognition passing between them through body language that combat veterans developed. Cortana, Chief transmitted through neural interface. Upload tactical doctrine. UNSC defensive protocols adapted for magical combat environment. Coordinate with Raynor's combat AI. We're running joint simulation demonstrating proper defensive execution. Uploading now, Cortana confirmed with processing speed that made magical projection interface seamlessly with UNSC tactical systems. Chief, I'm adapting our doctrine for capabilities these heroes actually possess. Might want to let Raynor take lead on explaining methodology. Your Spartan communication style is efficient, but these heroes need education rather than orders. He's got better bedside manner, relatively speaking. The simulation reset with parameters adjusted to reflect Chief and Raynor's coordinated defense rather than Cardinal's individual optimization. Okay, and kids, Raynor addressed heroes with voice-carrying authority that decades of command had refined. Watch and learn. First principle. Civilian protection is primary objective. Everything else, elimination count, personal advancement, legendary reputation, that's secondary. So we start by identifying evacuation routes and establishing defensive positions that protect those routes. Chief, mark optimal positions. Chief's tactical overlay appeared in magical projection with precision that made strategic planning visible to non-enhanced perception. Defensive positions creating interlocking fields of fire, choke points that channeled wave monsters away from civilian districts, fallback lines allowing tactical retreat without compromising evacuation corridors. Second principle, Raynor continued while simulation showed defensive execution, is mutual support. When one position is threatened, adjacent forces adjust to provide assistance, not because individual soldier can't handle engagement, because coordinated force multiplies effectiveness beyond sum of individual capabilities. Watch how Chief's position and mine create crossfire that eliminates threats neither of us could handle independently with same efficiency. The simulation played out with mechanical precision. Wave monsters manifesting and being channeled through kill zones, where coordinated fire eliminated them before they reached civilian populations. Defensive positions adjusting as threat assessment updated. Evacuation proceeding systematically rather than becoming chaotic rout. Projected casualties, 473. 94% reduction compared to Cardinal's approach. Third principle, Chief added with voice making tactical doctrine sound like immutable law, is adaptability. Plans fail when contact with enemy occurs. Professional soldiers acknowledge this and adjust, rather than rigidly adhering to initial strategy. Your legendary weapons provide capabilities our technology can't replicate. That's advantage. But advantage means nothing if you're too inflexible to modify approach when circumstances change. We can teach you coordination. Can't teach you to set aside ego that prevents accepting when modification is necessary. That's... His visor tracked across heroes. That's internal work you need to do independently. Silence descended as Cardinals processed demonstration that their approach had been catastrophically inadequate, and recognition warring with defensive pride that didn't want to acknowledge that irregular warriors had just provided education legendary system should have offered. That's... Ren started before trailing off, apparently unable to finish thought that acknowledged uncomfortable truth. That's how actual military forces operate. Naofumi completed with voice mixing vindication and frustration. I've been trying to explain this since summoning. That levels and stats don't replace tactical thinking. That legendary weapons are tools requiring skilled use rather than automatic victory conditions. But none of you listened because you treated this world like game with yourself as protagonist. Now you've got combat veterans from different universes demonstrating that maybe, just maybe, divine mandate doesn't exempt you from needing to learn how warfare actually works. Before Cardinals could formulate response that wounded pride would accept, alarms activated across Castle with urgency that suggested simulation had become tragically obsolete. Wave manifestation detected, magical sensors operator called with voice carrying across chamber. Timeline accelerated, dimensional tear opening in... Pause while readings updated. Opening in 30 minutes. Location confirmed. Capital City Civilian District. This is not drill. All forces to defensive stations. Heroes prepare for immediate deployment. The war room erupted into controlled chaos as personnel rushed to battle stations, and military coordination that peacetime had made theoretical suddenly becoming desperately practical. King Altcray's voice cut through chaos with authority that made crisis sound manageable, despite circumstances suggesting otherwise. Cardinal heroes, you heard tactical briefing. Implement coordination protocols demonstrated by irregulars. This is not request. This is royal command backed by recognition that civilian lives depend on you setting aside pride and fighting as unit. Understood. Understood, 3 heroes confirmed with varying degrees of conviction, their legendary weapons already activating as ambient mana responded to crisis. Chief Raynor, King addressed irregulars directly with tone mixing desperation and hope. You've demonstrated superior tactical understanding. I'm granting you field command authority for this engagement. Cardinal heroes will coordinate with your positioning. Military forces will follow your strategic direction, and if anyone, hero or soldier, objects to taking orders from irregulars, his expression hardened. Remind them that protecting 40,000 civilians is more important than protecting egos. Save my people, however necessary. That's only mandate that matters. Acknowledged, Chief confirmed, while tactical planning already optimized defensive deployment. Raynor, coordinate with conventional forces. Get them positioned according to protocols we demonstrated. I'll work with Cardinals. Ensure they understand coordination isn't suggestion. Cortana, upload full defensive plan to Kingdom's magical communication network. Make sure every defender knows their role and how it supports collective mission. We've got 30 minutes to prevent catastrophe. Move. Melromark Capital, Civilian District. The dimensional tear opened with violence that made reality scream. Space-time fabric rupturing along fault lines that conventional physics couldn't accommodate. Aperture expanding to diameter exceeding previous waves by factors that made comparison inadequate, and pouring through breach. Nightmare given form. Wave monsters manifested with concentration that made previous encounters look manageable. Thousands of creatures ranging from human-sized to building scale. Biological diversity suggesting dimensional tear was pulling material from dozens of realities simultaneously, and their assault coordinated by intelligence that made simple bestial aggression look inefficient. Chief stood at primary defensive choke point with Mjolnir's shields already flaring under sustained assault, his MA-40 eliminating threats with 3-round burst discipline while tactical overlay coordinated defensive network spanning entire engagement zone. All stations, status report. Chief commanded across communication network connecting UNSC technology, Terran systems, and magical relay simultaneously. Confirm positioning, verify fields of fire, update threat assessment as wave composition becomes clear. Responses cascaded across network with efficiency that proper coordination provided. Conventional forces acknowledging positions, mages confirming spell preparation, and most significantly, cardinal heroes operating as actual unit rather than competing individuals. Spear hero positioned at Junction 7, Motoyasu reported with voice lacking usual theatrical flair. Recognition that real combat made performance secondary to survival. Engaging cluster formation attempting to bypass primary choke point, eliminating approximately 40 hostiles per minute. Sustainable for pause while he assessed legendary weapons' energy reserves. Sustainable for 90 minutes before requiring rest cycle. Requesting backup if concentration increases beyond current level. Acknowledged, Chief confirmed while marking Motoyasu's position for potential support. Sword hero status? Engaging aerial threats. Ren replied with voice-carrying focus that suggested he'd actually listened to tactical briefing. Lightning-based attacks proving effective against flying variants, but they're adapting. Developing resistances. I'm cycling through elemental abilities to prevent complete immunity. Could use additional anti-air support if available. These things learn too fast for solo engagement to remain effective long-term. Raynor, redirect 3 mage squadrons to Sword Hero's position. Chief transmitted toward Terran Marshal coordinating conventional forces. Provide fire support that prevents aerial threats from overwhelming his position. Maintain that support until wave subsides or tactical situation changes. Confirm? Confirmed, Raynor acknowledged, while Gauss rifle eliminated ground threats attempting to flank defensive line. And Chief, heroes are actually coordinating. Actually requesting support when needed instead of pretending legendary weapons make assistance unnecessary. That's progress. Real progress. Keep them focused on mission instead of ego and we might actually save everyone. Casualties so far, 0. Let's maintain that. The battle intensified as wave reached peak manifestation. Dimensional tear achieving maximum aperture. Monster concentration exceeding anything previous engagements had produced. Defensive coordination tested by assault that made tactical planning feel inadequate. But coordination held. When Motoyasu's position was threatened by concentration exceeding his capability, Itsuki's bow provided precision fire that eliminated command organisms coordinating assault. When Ren's elemental cycling proved insufficient against adaptive flying creatures, the conventional forces coordinated magical bombardment, prevented breakthrough. When choke points Chief had established showed signs of being overwhelmed, Raynor's Gauss rifle eliminated high-value targets with precision that made numerical superiority irrelevant. They fought as unit, UNSC Spartan, Terran Marshal, Cardinal Heroes, conventional forces all subordinating individual capability to collective defense, protecting civilians through coordination that previous engagements had lacked. The wave subsided after 3 hours 17 minutes of sustained combat. Dimensional tear sealing with finality that suggested catastrophe had been temporary rather than permanent. Remaining monsters being eliminated through cleanup operations that conventional forces could handle without legendary support. Chief performed tactical assessment automatically. 40,000 civilians present, casualties, 87 from initial manifestation before defensive positions were fully established. All defensive stations maintained integrity throughout engagement. Coordination protocols executed with acceptable precision. Successful mission by metrics that mattered. People saved. Defensive doctrine validated. Proof that proper execution could prevent catastrophes that arrogance guaranteed. As defensive forces secured perimeter and began damage assessment, Motoyasu approached with expression mixing exhaustion and something that might have been respect if pride would allow full acknowledgement. That was... Motoyasu started before trailing off, apparently struggling to verbalize recognition that cooperation had achieved results individual excellence couldn't match. That was effective, more effective than my usual approach. The coordination, having backup when I needed it, knowing others were covering gaps I couldn't address, that made difference. Made me more effective despite reducing personal elimination count. He paused. That's not how I expected legendary combat to work. But it worked. Undeniably worked. So, thank you for teaching me, for not giving up on coordination despite my resistance, for proving that maybe extras can teach main characters important lessons. His voice firmed with decision. I'll try to be better, to fight smarter, to remember that protecting people matters more than personal glory. That's what heroes should do. What I should have been doing from start. Acknowledged, Chief replied, with voice suggesting he'd hoped for exactly that realization. Growth through recognizing limitations is how soldiers improve. You've got capabilities I don't possess. I've got experience you haven't developed. Together we're more effective than either could be independently. Remember that. Apply it. And maybe next wave, we save everyone. Not just most people. Everyone. His visor tracked towards celebrating civilians who'd survived when statistics said they shouldn't have. That's goal worth pursuing, regardless of who receives narrative credit. Across Capital City, forces from 3 universes processed that extras had just orchestrated defense that saved 40,000 lives. Our tactical coordination between dimensions proving that competence transcended legendary status when survival demanded performance. And in Royal Strategy Chamber, King Alt-Cray was drafting reforms that would integrate irregular warriors' methodology into Kingdom's defensive doctrine, recognition that divine mandate needed to be supplemented by tactical expertise that summoning system hadn't provided. But for Chief and Raynor, political implications mattered less than mission accomplished. People saved, defensive coordination validated, proof that sometimes extras were exactly what story needed. They weren't chosen by gods, weren't blessed by fate, weren't protagonists in narrative that required legendary status. They were soldiers doing job that circumstances demanded. And sometimes, often, that made all the difference. The dimensional breach that brought them to Melromark remained unexplained. Return to home universes still impossible. Future uncertain in ways tactical planning couldn't resolve. But they'd found purpose that transcended dimensional boundaries. Protecting people who couldn't protect themselves. Coordinating forces to achieve missions individual capability couldn't accomplish. Demonstrating that extras who prioritized competence over glory could save more lives than legends who prioritized recognition. That was enough. For now. Until next wave. Until next crisis. Until next time reality needed soldiers who understood that heroism wasn't about legendary weapons or divine mandate. It was about showing up, doing job, saving people, regardless of narrative expectations. And if that made them extras in someone else's story, they'd steal every scene through competence that made legendary status look insufficient. Because that's what professionals did. Across universes, across dimensions, across every boundary that suggested cooperation was impossible. They adapted, they coordinated, they survived. Together, mission complete. Civilians saved, coordination validated. The 2 combat veterans from different universes proved that extras could outperform main characters when competence mattered more than destiny. Master Chief and Jim Raynor were stranded in fantasy world where magic was real and legendary. Heroes were chosen by gods. They became the extras no one expected, the irregulars who demonstrated that tactical excellence transcended divine mandate. The soldiers who taught legends that protecting people required more than blessed weapons. And in world designed for heroes, they proved something fundamental. Sometimes the most important characters are the ones who show up, do the job, and save lives, regardless of whether narrative recognizes their contribution. That was their story. Not chosen by fate, not blessed by gods, just professionals ensuring mission success when legendary system proved inadequate. And Melromark would never be the same. Because extras who steal scenes through competence tend to rewrite narratives whether main characters approve or not. Welcome to a world where Master Chief and Jim Raynor became extras and changed everything.